So here we go again. Just when it seemed like Social Security beneficiaries might finally catch a break, when inflation was starting to creep up and it looked like we were on track for a decent cost of living adjustment, bam. A policy change hits, and now the Supreme Court may be about to crush that momentum entirely. I know it's frustrating. You're probably thinking, can we just get a win already? I hear you. I feel the same way. But let me break it down because what just happened could completely change the course of your Social Security checks for next year, and not in a good way. Over the last couple months, we've been tracking inflation. We've been talking about the CPIW, the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, which is the metric Social Security uses to determine the COLA, or cost of living adjustment. That's what gives your benefit a raise each year. And the numbers were starting to point in the right direction. Higher inflation, higher CPIW, higher COLA. That's usually how it works. But now, that entire trajectory might be going out the window. Here's what changed. Just a couple days ago, a major court ruling came out, this one from the U.S. Court of International Trade. They ruled that the tariffs the president implemented, specifically the ones tied to what the administration called Liberation Day, are unlawful. Yep, they said the president broke the law by unilaterally putting those tariffs into place. No congressional approval, no proper process. They said it violated the rules. So what does that mean? It means those tariffs are getting repealed. The ruling says the administration can't just throw on tariffs without going through the right steps. And now the whole issue is heading to the Supreme Court, where it's going to be battled out in front of the highest court in the land. They're going to look at whether these tariffs can be reinstated or if they're permanently blocked. Now, I know what you're thinking. What in the world do tariffs have to do with Social Security? Good question. It doesn't seem connected at first glance, but trust me, this is a really big deal. Because here's how all of this ties together, and ultimately how it could reduce or even eliminate any increase in your benefits next year. For the last few months, because of the tariffs, retailers had a built-in excuse to raise prices. Companies like Walmart came out and said, "We're increasing prices due to the tariffs." And that's exactly what happened. Prices on consumer goods began to climb. Now remember, inflation is what drives COLA increases. When prices go up, the CPIW rises. When the CPIW rises, Social Security beneficiaries get a bigger raise. So ironically, even though those price hikes hurt at the cash register, they were setting the stage for a higher COLA. It was one of those weird situations where inflation was working for beneficiaries, at least in the short term. Sure, your money didn't go as far, but at least you'd get a little more of it next year. But now, if the Supreme Court sides with the lower court and kills those tariffs for good, all of that could come to a screeching halt. No tariffs means less reason for companies to raise prices, inflation cools off, CPIW flattens out. And you guessed it, that potential raise to your Social Security benefits disappears. And let me tell you, retailers aren't likely to reverse the price increases they've already made. I think we all know how this works. Once prices go up, they rarely come back down, especially if companies already got away with blaming tariffs. They'll just say it was a one-time adjustment, that they needed to protect their margins, yada yada. So what we're stuck with is the worst of both worlds: higher prices and no COLA increase to compensate. This is what I've been warning about for months. If the tariffs stayed in place, prices would go up, and that would mean a higher CPIW and a bigger COLA. But now, we lose the inflation driver, so we lose the COLA bump. Meanwhile, we're still stuck paying those higher prices because retailers already locked them in. It's a lose-lose. So this is the dilemma. Would you rather have high inflation and a higher COLA, or stable prices with no raise? And it's a fair question because high COLAs sound good, but they only chase the tail of inflation. You might get a bigger check, but everything you buy costs more too. Your purchasing power doesn't necessarily improve. Sometimes it just barely keeps you afloat. Now, if we're being honest, the better scenario would be no inflation at all. Flat prices. That way, your current benefit would stretch further and you wouldn't need a COLA just to stay even. But that's not the world we live in. Prices have already jumped because of the tariffs. So rolling back those tariffs now won't undo the damage. It just stops the CPI from reflecting it in your next check. I know it's exhausting. It's like we're stepping over dollars to pick up nickels. You lose purchasing power, and then you don't even get the COLA that's supposed to make up for it. And guess what? Pennies are about to stop being minted anyway. So maybe it's more like stepping over dollars to pick up nothing. And don't think for a second that Congress is going to step in and give us a supplemental COLA or an emergency bump. They've made it clear they don't want to touch Social Security unless it's to cut it or means test it or raise the retirement age. So now, it's all in the hands of the Supreme Court. If they uphold the lower court ruling and keep the tariffs off, we could be looking at one of the lowest COLAs in years. And remember, all of this is still unfolding. We don't know exactly how the Supreme Court is going to rule yet. But based on the lower court's decision and how quickly they moved to call the tariffs illegal, it doesn't look great. If they double down and uphold the repeal, this is going to ripple through every part of the economy, and that includes Social Security. So the big takeaway here, don't count on a major COLA boost next year. Not unless inflation somehow finds another way to take off. And right now, without tariffs driving price increases, that looks unlikely. The data we've been seeing in the inflation reports, the CPI numbers that come out every month, they were starting to trend higher. That's why COLA projections were also ticking up. But without a catalyst like tariffs to keep inflation climbing, those projections are probably about to stall out. And that brings us right back to where we started. Social Security recipients, over 70 million of you, waiting for a benefit increase that might never come. Meanwhile, your bills aren't going down. Your rent isn't going down. Your groceries, your utilities, your prescriptions, they're not magically getting cheaper just because tariffs got repealed. So, this is where we are, caught in the middle of a legal battle over trade policy that's dragging your monthly Social Security check along for the ride. Unbelievable. It really feels like we can't win. And again, none of this is final yet. The Supreme Court hasn't issued a ruling, but all signs are pointing to a decision that could leave you with no raise next year, even though prices already went up. Now, before I let you go, if you're on Medicare or you're about to enroll, I want to remind you to connect with a trusted advisor. It's completely free, and these folks are already helping thousands of people in our community every single month. They'll walk you through all your options: Medicare Advantage, Medicare Supplements, Part D, Medigap, whatever you need. They'll help you find a plan that fits your budget, your providers, your prescriptions, everything. And they'll search through over 20,000 plans nationwide to find you the best deal. Let me just say this: none of us like being the ones who always end up paying the price, literally. Whether it's inflation, taxes, or repealed tariffs, it always circles back to our wallets. That's why it's so frustrating watching these decisions get tossed around in the courts, while over 70 million people who depend on Social Security benefits are left wondering what's coming next. One ruling here, another there, and suddenly the cost of living adjustment we were counting on is at risk. And let's be real, how often do prices go up and then come back down just because the excuse for raising them disappears? Not often. Retailers raise prices, then they stay there. Yet Social Security recipients get maybe one shot a year at a little extra breathing room. So when the Supreme Court gets involved in something like tariffs, it doesn't feel like just a trade issue. It feels personal, because the ripple effects touch the very benefits people rely on to pay rent, buy groceries,